Good evening, welcome to Stafford City Council. Reminder, if you have a cell phone, would you mute it or turn it off? That's totally up to you. Our Pledge of Allegiance is going to be offered by Councilman Brad Hemphill, followed by the invocation by Councilman Mike Anazola. Would you stand and remain standing for both, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, we thank you for bringing us together as a family in your name to represent this great community that we live in. We are thankful for our citizens that are here tonight, for the Graham Stars, our Park and Rec Committee. We thank them for being gracious for what they do for our community. We thank our city employees, our city manager, our city clerk, and our department heads and our employees. And we most of all ask you to please send your spirit amongst all of us up here tonight that are making decisions for the city. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it. B, do I have citizen comments on agenda items, non-agenda items? Okay. It's going to bring us to item 7, the youth group presentation. Tony?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilmen. A few of my youth are here, the ones that attended the 2023 Cities and Towns Youth Conference. Great experience there in Tucson, Arizona. The kids really enjoyed it. They learned a lot, but I'm gonna let them explain what they learned. And we did a great presentation on the Park and Recreations, which they've been part of. And they actually have some slides that we're waiting to get pulled up, and we wanted to share some slides on what they've done in the conference. So it was really interesting, and I'll let the kids kind of explain what they were doing, okay?
But yeah, like Tony said, we learned a lot. We had a lot of fun. Some of these slides will show, like the one on the left shows some of the people that were talking, and they were kind of doing like a Q&A at the end, talking about like just some of the questions that the youth could have, and the adults were like giving like their say on it and how it can help us. And then we got to interact a lot with the other youth groups, the other youth councils from other places, and for me, like the biggest take I got was that they helped us with like what we could do surrounding like mental health and certain situations at our school, and ways that we can help and kind of benefit our schools off of helping each other and being like more unified. And yeah, I've been doing these I went with Tony last year and the year before that, and I've learned a lot of new things every year. And yeah, and I've seen a lot of other groups take some of our ideas and use them as their own. I'm not sure if she has a picture of that, but there was a group that took some of our ideas and kind of applied it to their county and city. But yeah, I can let.
I am Aaron Cutler, and I went to the 2023 Cities and Council meeting, and it was really fun and it was enjoyable. The people that were talking and helping us out and giving us advice and stuff kind of made everything to where like we can enjoy it and we can have fun while learning to do it. And like in the picture in the right, we got to talk and we got to give advice also to the other youth that were there. And that was kind of good to just give back to while we were also learning about other stuff. And that's kind of all I have.
I'm Matthew Madrid, and I also went. It was pretty fun to learn what other towns and cities were doing for their town, especially with learning about like how they manage like the mental health issues at their school, because mental health it leads to kids getting into drugs and like alcohol and stuff. And I know at our school especially we I don't think we have that many counselors, but it was good to see how they help their mental health issues at their school and how we can help ours. And it was a pretty fun event. We got to take a picture with the ASU mascot, and we got to learn about other cities and towns too.
ASU,
No, you will be all the way.
What I've noticed what they did this year, which they didn't do in the past, was they had more activities for the youth to do instead of them just sitting there. As you can tell in the pictures, they did a lot of getting up, interacting with a lot of the youth, playing different games with them, which was great. They had music going on for the kids, and it was really nice. The guest speakers were awesome. They had one young lady up there talking about how she went through almost like a middle-age crisis, but young middle-age crisis during high school year. And when I discussed it with my teens, if there was an issue there with even like domestic violence to suicides, of course they mentioned drug abuse, vaping. At first they were like, no, it's not an issue. And I go, you think not? And then the more we spoke about it, they agreed, yes, it is. And then I says, well, how can we, bullying's a big issue. Okay, well, let's go back to the beginning. Because when someone bullies, it's usually because they're getting it at home or they've been bullied, so how can we make that change? And the more we talked about it, they did mention, yes, it has a lot to do with the mental health, suicide, and it was scary when they started really thinking about it. And one thing that really turned on the light bulb for me is during their junior years when it's really stressful. I mean, when you go into a freshman, you're excited, everything's new. Sophomore, you're just having fun. It's the junior year for majority of these students that they have to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life. What direction, what college. I need to do good in this test. I need to do good in my ASTs. I need to, be that perfect student to get where I need to go. But figure out what they want to do for the rest of life, because senior year, it's just fun. Everything should already be set in place. And I didn't realize that. I mean, my kids are grown, but I haven't really thought about that until we really talked about that. And it made a lot of sense. So I was like, we do need to make changes. And unfortunately, there is no counselor that the students can talk to. They've mentioned teachers that they can talk to. They're busy, and we understand. So it's like, okay, guys, what can we do to make changes? What direction can we go? So that's something that we really want to look into, but something to help out. But it was really nice to just open that up. A lot of students questioned them about what they could do in their area to, start equipment for teens, things that they can do, because, their towns are just as small as ours, and they needed something to do, something to release stress, other things that they can do. So it was really good. I really enjoyed this one. We got a lot of feedback on this one, so I really enjoyed it. And I'd like to thank you guys. The Airbnb was great, relaxing. The kids had a great time. Yes, I mean, I have a bunch of great kids, and they're willing to do some work to get something at least started and then continue with the park and recreation.
Thank you, Tony. Go ahead.
Tony, I lost track of how many years you've been helping us with this.
I think this is at least 4 or 5.
4 or 5, probably
Yes.
more like 5. I want to thank you for your leadership on this. I began talking to you too, seems like 5 years, although it's probably been 2, on the parks.
Yes.
And the influence. I'm glad you had influence on the parks and recreation with it. In fact, we have a presentation on it. What stage we're at now. I warned you about the bureaucracy that you'd be bumping our heads with, but thank you for that so much. And 2, when I was there, you guys had told me that the emotional stress that was one of the topics you guys were talking about, which you just did. Later on this evening, we have a presentation from the police department on bullying. And that's very important, how bad it is in middle school, too. So I appreciate all that you do in this group and bringing them around keeping it in front of us, some of the things that are going on. And I'm hoping that this council will continue to help you with this and you help us.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Some of your sisters even were here a couple years ago and other people, so thank you again. I do have some certificates for you to hand out, which also coming from Safford, they didn't have certificates like this. And last year, I forget her name too.
Kelly.
Kelly. She asked me about, do you have certificates and stuff so I can add it to my profile? It helps me with my resume, applying for scholarships and stuff like that. And when I asked the League of Cities and Towns, they had no thing. So Callie began this, and now every attendee from the schools around the state get some recognition like this, so they can put in their file, their jacket or whatever it is. So I don't know if you're gonna stay around for because we also have a presentation on the parks. See what stage we're at, where we're going to, some of the ideas. That's totally up to you. And,
I'll be around, but the boys actually have soccer games they need to attend to.
okay, so if you still have a minute, I'd like to hand these out, ma'am.
Thank you.
Here, Lisa. Gotta get these gentlemen. Xavier Webb, he carried the flag for us in the parade of flags for the cities and towns. All the cities and towns parade, like 98 cities and towns, parade around showing their flag and their flag. And Eric. Get that out. I don't wanna lick it. Oh, COVID have it. I developed that over COVID have it. Nah. Thank you guys so much. Thank you very much. I hope I get some of you there. I have Haley here too. Oh, hey. Make sure you get Mr. Hemphill in. Handsome one of the bunch. Thank you, gentlemen.
Tony, we appreciate it. Councilman Lopez, thank you. We're going to go ahead and close our regular meeting and reconvene into a council work session. Our work session is 9-1 Kimberly Horn on the 8th Avenue Park design. So Gabe, will you come on up and start us off?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we wanted a working session. If you guys remember last month, Kimberly Horn came and presented 3 different alternatives for the Discovery Park and 8th Avenue Park Complex. You guys gave quite a bit of feedback, good feedback from the council and the Parks Committee. Tonight they want to kind of review, they made all those modifications and try to incorporate them into a master plan. So they'll get that opportunity to review it with you guys. Obviously we want a working session. Any input that you guys got and feedback, we'd appreciate it. So with that, we'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Right. Thank you and good evening. Really happy to be here to present where we're at with the master plan for the Discovery Park and 8th Avenue Park Complex. To go over just what we're going to go through today, introductions first. I'll start. My name is Rebecca Field. I'm a landscape architect with Kimberly Horn and Associates. I've been doing landscape architecture here in Arizona for the past 20 years. Have done a lot of parks projects throughout the state and specifically in the southern portions of Arizona. So very excited to be here. I also have Kevin Payne here with us. He's in the front row. He's our civil engineer. So if there are any questions regarding the some more of the specific site aspects, he's here to answer those for you. I want to give a summary of the feedback that we received during the previous work session and then review the master plan that is the result of hearing all of your comments and then making those changes in the plan. And then I wanted to also go over next steps. So just as a quick refresher, at our last meeting, we showed you all 3 concepts. They're shown here on the screen. We talked through the various elements from each of them. As we know, this park has 5 major features that we are looking to incorporate, and then of course a variety of other amenities. Those main features are a splash pad, amphitheater, pinchless zip line, a play space, And then we also are looking at creating a pickleball court complex as well. So those are the top 5 elements that we're looking at. All 3 of these concepts included those, but they were all in various configurations. What we heard from you all last time is that the amphitheater design in concept 1 was preferable to move forward. We learned that the restroom configuration that we showed in concept 3, which had 2 restrooms on the west side of the graveyard wash, were preferable. The food truck area from concept 2 was the preferred approach moving forward, and that food truck area was a combined parking area and food truck court, so it allowed for flexibility. The parking lot design from concept 2 was also preferred, and then what we call the western half of concept 3, that's the west side of the park project across the graveyard wash. That is the configuration that we showed was the most desirable based on the feedback we heard. So combining all of that feedback, this is where we landed with the master plan. I'll walk you through it, starting with A at the top. We start with a Ramada area that's on the very north side of the site, which leads right into a natural splash pad location. We have a splash pad design that we shared with the community as part of a preference survey, and we got some really good feedback on the type and the look and the feel of the splash pad. So that's what's reflected there as B. As we move south, we move into some of the play areas. We have a natural playground space, which is listed as item C. That includes the pinchless zip line. It includes an area for both 2 to 5-year-olds and then 5 to 12-year-olds as well. And what we're looking at is creating a very inclusive play space so that we have all ages and abilities that can use these playgrounds. As we move further down, I'm going to skip to J because J is our fit core and teen space area. So we heard from the community that this is a desirable amenity that should be in this park space. It is a little more like parkour style. It has different challenging elements so that the teens and those that want to do exercise can use those facilities. We've made sure to separate what we consider the younger play area, so the splash pad, the younger playground, from the fit core and the older playground spaces. So we've been very mindful to make sure those uses are appropriately cited in the park. We have ample parking, so that's shown as D. There's 2 parking locations. There's one along 8th Avenue, and then there's another parking lot along Discovery. And we'll go into some of the specifics on the parking here on the next slide. As we move through, we have some open lawn spaces, so that's what E is. We have a lot of great open, flexible lawn space so that we can accommodate picnics, we can accommodate group events. Oh, okay. It's locking up. All right, so we have the lawn space that can accommodate lots of different activities. We heard that this is a really great amenity that is not currently in the city right now. So the allowance to have a big lawn space to really have a lot of room for people to come out and get together is something that the city of Safford will really benefit from. As we move through the site, we have pickleball courts. That's at the very south end. That's showing as item F. And those pickleball courts have 4 different playing areas. They also have 2 Ramada features that are next to them, and then what we're calling an open game lawn space. That's just to the left. It's that linear stretch of turf there that can be for cornhole. It can be for any kind of bring your own type of game. We also have our food truck court in that location. That's item K. It looks like a cul-de-sac. It's allowing for food trucks to pull around. It allows enough circulation, and we've checked this with our auto turns and our computer programs to make sure that it does function well. But we can get food trucks lined up. We have space for 6+ food trucks in this location that also allow for circulation to continue. So we don't have a dead-end parking situation. We have a nice space that can have food trucks when there's an event, or it can double as parking for the pickleball courts when there's not a food truck event. We heard at our last discussion that the pickleball courts would benefit from having parking near it, so that's where we made that change to the plan. As we look at the restroom locations, I think those are important to point out. We have a call out there for the 2 restroom sites. One of them is up on the north end near the splash pad and the playgrounds. And then the other one is right next to the bridge, which is item G on the plan. So we wanted a bridge, a pedestrian bridge, to connect the west side and the east side of the park. And the restroom makes a nice, convenient location. Do I need to keep touching it, Gabe? Thank you. All right. All right, so when we cross the bridge, item G, we come to the amphitheater space. Thank you. The amphitheater has ample lawn, it has sidewalks, it has the little brown squares that you see, those are the Ramada locations. So we have a few Ramadas, and then we have a nice large parking area there to the south along Discovery Park Boulevard. We also have some trails that are running on the east side of the amphitheater that allow for just passive recreation. It creates a nice buffer between the park activities and the cemetery. Another item that I'll point out is we do recognize the access control that is needed for this site, so we've incorporated some perimeter fencing. We're looking at a post and cable fence along Discovery Park and then running up on 8th. Of course, around the splash pad and around the play areas, we'd need a more robust fence, and we'll show you some images of what that can look like here in the next slide or so. Other features of this, we have a significant slope that's there on the east between the park and the cemetery site. That slope is being maintained, and again, it's somewhat of a natural barrier and access control on that side as well. Moving on to the next slide. These are some images that show some of the different amenities, and again, these are based on what we've heard from the community are the preferred look and feel of these types. This is the amenity of the amphitheater. So again, this is a similar look to what we might create here at our park space. It has the lawn seating, it has shade trees providing that natural cooling effect, and then it has a band shell. And we'll work with you all to decide on the design of that specifically within the budget, but this is the look and feel that the community is after. This is the splash pad space. Again, the feedback that we received was pretty strong in the vein of a natural looking play space. We know that there are splash pads that have more of the toys and the features. What we heard very strongly from the community was that a more natural play space was desired, and so this was reflecting that. This image shows a really nice way of creating natural barriers, and so we may look at incorporating something like the walls that you see on the side to help control access, still keep with the visual theme of the space, but really help to define the area and keep it safe. This is what the preferred pickleball court configuration is. Again, it shows the 2 courts in this case. We'll have 4, but it shows the courts, and then it shows some Ramada areas as well. And then we have our Pinch-A-List zip line. We definitely got the feedback that more than one was preferred so that kids could race down, and so that's what's shown here. We have 2 zip lines that are running with some shade elements so that you can have that extra added feature of a dual raceway down the zip line. And then lastly, this is the inclusive space play concept. This again is the highest rated image from your community. It shows some topography being built into the landscape. It creates a more dynamic play space rather than your set play structures that honestly tend to get boring over time for kids. So this creates more of a imaginative play opportunity, and again includes those inclusive play structures that all different abilities can use and enjoy. So the next slide has some more images of some of the auxiliary features. This is the bridge. This was the look and feel that the community was most interested in. We'll look at what's appropriate for the span that we're looking to cross, but looking at a nice decorative bridge like this as part of the process. Ramadas were another big feature, so we do have several Ramadas located throughout the park. We have small and large. This is an example of a large Ramada. So we've costed those things out, and we'll include those as we move forward into the actual design phases. For the food truck court, this was the image that was the most preferred by the community. So it shows kind of a nice grouping of the trucks, which we're creating with that cul-de-sac space, and that it includes a shade structure, which the master plan does include a large shade structure adjacent to the food truck area. This is an example of a fence that we may want to incorporate around the splash pad and the playground. Again, the splash pad concept that we are looking at for now has some of those natural walls that we can consider. This kind of idea with a nice low fence with maybe stone columns would tie nicely into that wall. So we want to make sure the fence is a high quality as well, and it's not detracting from the view that we're trying to create with the park. And then as we move forward, the last image, this is just an example of what a FitCore space might look like, a teen play zone. Some different walls, different elements to challenge yourself on. So as we move on to some of the facts, because I'm sure you have questions about parking and some of the different areas that we're using. Parking, we have 142 spaces total within the park. There are 72 on the west side. 20 of those are within the food truck area. So when we have a food truck event, those 20 spots will be taken up with food trucks. But when there's not an event, those can be general public parking as well. On the east side, we have 70 parking spaces. We do know that there has been some discussion on use of the land across the street as an overflow parking space. So this is how we are addressing the fact that when there's a big event at the amphitheater, we're gonna need more parking, but we don't wanna overpark the park for day-to-day conditions. So we have 70 on one side, 72 on the west side. Currently, we're showing a splash pad area of about 2,800 square feet. This is within our cost models. For comparison, Thatcher's splash pad is about 2,300 square feet, so we're a little bit bigger than that. We have an amphitheater area right now showing 12,000 square feet. It's pretty significant. It can fit 500 plus people. So as we look into scaling and looking at the costs, we can decide if that's the appropriate number, but this is what we've designed right now. We have 2.2 acres of open turf, and as I mentioned, 4 pickleball courts, 9 16-foot by 16-foot ramadas, and 2 medium to large ramadas. One of those is located near the food truck court. Looking at the budget, we know that we have a general fund budget of up to $6 million for this project. There are some big ticket items that I'll point out. We have the amphitheater, but as I mentioned, that's a scalable item. We can decide how big we want to go with that. We're showing kind of the maximum space use right now, but we can look at that as we get into the budget and the design. The playground areas with shade, as I mentioned, those are a really central feature to this park. Those are one of your big ticket items, over $500,000. The splash pad is another one, excuse me, and then the parking areas are the last. So we also have some that are over $250,000 within the design. The restrooms, irrigation system, we do have a lot of turf, so we do need to irrigate all of that turf. We have pickleball courts, ramadas. We are putting curb and gutter along 8th Avenue as part of this project, so that is included in the cost. And then the sidewalks and site lighting. So all of that fits within that general fund amount. And we of course know that that is our budget, and so when we move into the next phases, we'll be designing to that budget at a maximum for the whole park. On the side, we have utility costs. Do you want to mention that? That's a separate item. It's about $1.5 million to bring that sewer down to the site, along with all the other utilities that are needed for the park.
Who came up with that?
The cost for the
For
sewer?
the sewer.
So the sewer line, we did an estimate. It was roughly about $1 million for the length that it needs, based on our
And
experience.
you're just coming up 8.
I'm sorry?
You're just coming up 8 with the sewer line.
Correct. It's a big cost.
$1 million, huh? Can't do it in-house cheaper.
This is based on some of the costs that we've talked about with staff and based on the experience that we have recently in a project in southern Arizona that did about the same length of sewer, and that's unfortunately what it ended up costing. It's pretty significant, some of the utility items. So as we look at next steps, we have a final master plan pending your approval to move forward with this in October. So next month, we'll have a final master plan. Once we have that plan, we'll move into 30% design for the entire park. The entire master plan will be designed to what we call a 30% level, which is basically preliminary design for the entire park site. That will be complete by November of 2023. We would love to get your feedback on that full design. And then once we talk about the budget, talk about those specifics in more detail, we'll evaluate what can go further into the 60%, which is we'll call it a pre-final design level. And we'll do that in January of 2024. We'll design for that 60% level for what we can afford as part of phase 1. Then we'll take that to 90% plans in February, and then final plans in March, so that you can get them out to bid for that first phase of the project. Are there any questions about this process?
I didn't see where you were locating the controls for the splash pad.
Sure. If you could scroll back up. So the restroom building that is located in that vicinity, there's 4 stalls that are located on the front face of that, and then that whole back area is our equipment room. So those are where all the controls for the splash pad would be.
And that's far enough away from the people because of the chlorine smell, and it's not gonna harm anybody?
Yes, so it's a recirculating system. All of the pipes would be underground. We may have a surge tank, and that is enclosed. It would be underground, and it would just be to the side of that structure, but it would not be open chlorine or anything like that.
And the chlorine area is apart from the controls? Because like at Thatcher's Park, there's a lot of corrosion that takes place in there because they're all in the same room.
Right. This is definitely enough space to compartmentalize so that chlorine area where we have some of the chemicals, where we have the surge tank or other controls can be separated from the actual electrical pieces as well.
And is it centered enough to where a lot of the electrical controls for the entire park can be located too?
We can have some controls in that restroom building, and then we have another restroom building, if you scroll down, there we go, that's right central to the park. So for that whole west side, those 2 structures can accommodate those more functional aspects. It can also function as storage as well.
You have any idea yet where transformers or what size you may need, where they're gonna be placed?
Not I don't know the size yet. As far as placement, we would again look pretty central. One thing that I will point out, and it's shown in those 2 thick dashed black lines, that is a gas easement. It's an El Paso natural gas easement that runs through the site. This was a significant constraint to our design process where we couldn't have structures over it. We couldn't have anything that could not be easily put back if there needed to be an impact. So we know that that wouldn't go in that easement line, but it would probably be somewhat central on either side of that easement where we would put the electrical controls.
So at what stage would it be more appropriate to ask these electrical questions?
It would be at the 30%.
At well, now, because I mean, we can hide the transformers under a pretend rock, a facade. but-
Sure. So once the master plan is okay to move forward, we'll go into the 30% stage, and that's our next step, where we would have those plans to you all in November. That's when we'd show more detail on where some of those specific controls would be occurring.
So what other information you gonna need from us, where we would like to place the outlets, or what?
Sure, if there's specific requests on outlets, like as we talked before about the food truck area, what kind of, outlets you might want to provide. When we look at the amphitheater, there's a lot that we could get into as far as the function of that amphitheater. We could install outlets, we could look at what kind of equipment you might want to have there if you want any equipment there at all, or if you're expecting people to just bring their own equipment and plug in. We would just need to get into that level of detail once we get further into the design.
So what more information you need from our staff to accomplish that?
The uses that you're expecting. So if you have a desired number of outlets, if you have, placement where you'd like to see them, what, from a maintenance standpoint, we might want to consider, those are some pieces that would be helpful.
Because everybody has their favorite dish, they want to come and plug their crock pot in and show off. So we still have room for input from our
Absolutely.
staff in there. Okay.
Absolutely, yes, because right now this is really about placement of amenities and size of amenities, but the details and what exactly those ramadas are gonna look like, how you want them to look with the way your maintenance staff wants to take care of them, that is all to be decided still.
Is that's one of the complaints public has is we plugged 5 crock pots into it and the breaker kicked. Well, yeah, that's gonna happen, but.
Right, so if we know that, if we know there's gonna be 5 crock pots and 1 ramada, we'll design for that and make sure that we have the appropriate outlets and that we have the right electrical loads accounted for in our design.
So, the other lady was here then. Where's the piñata pole?
There's a couple of things that we know have to happen. One of them is a tractor somewhere, and that's for Andy, who I don't think is here, but she wants a tractor somewhere, and then a piñata pole. So yeah, when we get into detailed design, we can start
I
calling out.
wanna see that design, how they can safely put their piñata up there, make it dance, and I'm waiting to see that.
Okay, to
If
noted.
you come, I got the first idea, so if we come up with one, I'm in on the patent. All right?
Kevin's writing
He's
that
writing it
down. He's
down.
writing it down.
I'm in on the patent. Okay. That's all I have so far, Mayor. Anybody else?
I have a question, but I don't know that I want to ask it. Is there any possibility that if we did parking on the south side of Discovery, that we could put people through that pipe or create a way to funnel them in there without crossing that street? I don't know how big that pipe is. It's probably not big enough for that, but I know it only runs water 20 or 30 days a year, so I just was thinking I hate driving west on that street in the afternoon and having people dodge me because I didn't see them. And I just, that may be for another phase later. I don't know. I just wanted to ask it while we were asking questions.
Kevin's our drainage engineer. I'm not sure if you've looked at that culvert at all in any detail. Yeah.
I think it's a good question that we don't have an answer for right now, but it's not something that's been brought up or considered, but we can definitely look at that. And even if, like you said, maybe if that is a future phase, if we could try to accommodate it now to allow that expansion in the future, it's something I'll note and we'll look into.
I just think about that time of day when you're gonna start an evening thing and you're looking into the sun. It's just, man, there's a recipe for disaster there.
Yeah, I think pedestrian safety is definitely something that has been brought up for sure, especially during the large events like you talk about. So appreciate that feedback. I think that's an idea we can look into.
So the traffic study is more in Mr. Bowman's hands to slow people down, more signage and stuff. I'm sure he's thinking of that now too. Because coming down that slope, they're going quick. We get their attention early. We can right turn them a little better, all that that's.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the comments and stuff. I guess the thinking on that is if we have overflow parking, it's gonna be for a major event. We didn't want to design this park in the event of all of the one-offs. So this will accommodate 95% of the usage of the park. If we have an event to where it's an overflow, we're definitely gonna want to get traffic control to police, some ways of managing traffic and the interaction there. So we'll look at what that is, but for the park design itself, I don't think we want to design for the minor stuff, it's the major stuff. So we'll definitely have to look at that, and the major events and how we control traffic in that area. So maybe some detours or something where we can get them through safely, so.
Mayor, I don't know that in a work session, the Parks Committee's allowed to ask anything.
I think they can. It's a work session. They didn't fill out anything. And I don't know that, well, you know what? I don't know if they can.
Yeah, they can.
They can?
I don't know if they have any, but I don't wanna.
Public comment, so.
Okay.
I don't know if they have any or not, but I sure don't want to close the door.
Well, the only thing I wanted to add, and I was with Reed just a little bit ago, but we really need to get his input since he would be setting up a lot of the sound system equipment to make sure that everything is addressed as far as this is concerned. And to your point about if we have to do additional parking, because we've never discussed that on the south side of Discovery Park Boulevard, but if there's an event or festival
Yeah,
Is that
and we did have that
You
discussion.
can't see when you're coming westbound right there in the afternoon.
And we did have that discussion. In fact, I think we jokingly talked about using that very tunnel to traffic people underneath the road. But there were several discussions in terms of lighting and any kind of signage, and also having people doing traffic control. So it's something that has been discussed.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Mr. Linden. There's still some input on the amphitheater, especially in back, because when you get Gila Cheer there in Safford Dance Academy, some of them little girls change 3 times, and so they need a little place to be able to change in back. So that's some input I wanted in the future that needed lit up, and you gotta have their little mirrors, you know. So that's still to come too, though. We won't forget it, hopefully, between all of us.
I'll expand on that just a little bit as far as the amphitheater design. One of the comments that we heard at our last discussion was making sure we provided easy back-of-house access, and we have done that with this plan. So if you scroll to the south gate from the parking lot, yeah, there is a direct route from the parking area up that side path that runs next to the wash. That path is wide enough to allow for a vehicle to run all the way up and into the back of house there. So we've made sure that there is that strong access so that we can accommodate some of those uses and make sure we have a space for equipment drop-off and things like that.
Yeah, I think that was a concern of Mr. Hempfield, that we had first aid available.
Emergency access, yes, yes. So there is now some really good, strong emergency access to the north part of that stage.
I think you asked that one, Brad, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it was me, but like we've mentioned, there'll be a time down the road, because the green room and those are some of the amenities that we definitely want to kick
Sure.
around some more
Sure.
when we get closer.
I believe we mentioned at one time, another bridge.
Yes.
At the last meeting.
There definitely was discussion on would this site benefit from another bridge? And we felt like with the design that has been created, that one bridge is in a really convenient spot to help conserve cost that would come with adding that second bridge. And it does create from 8th Avenue a really strong visual across the park. So if you're driving down 8th, coming in that driveway, visually you'll be able to see all the way across the park, and it'll provide you with a really nice access and kind of wayfinding as you enter. So we felt that one bridge creates a really kind of a unified theme across both sides and anchors both together through that one connection.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the flow, people getting crossed and stuff, especially in case there's an accident. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, could we add solar to kind of help with the utility costs?
Yes, definitely. So we can add in alternative energy sources. We can do solar panels. We can look at ways to perhaps use covered parking with solar, canopies on top, that kind of thing. The main utility cost is really coming from that sewer line, unfortunately. It's a pretty significant stretch that we have to run. I don't recall the linear feet off the top of my head, but that's where that cost is coming in. And again, what we've looked at is a comparable project. It is a park project in southern Arizona. It's in Sahuarita, where we ran about the same amount of sewer pipe, and it did unfortunately end up costing about that number. So that's the big number for utilities, is that sewer.
Chairwoman, I saw him write down your question, so he's thinking about it already, so. I'm sure I'll have 100 more afterwards, Mayor, but right now I don't.
Anybody else have anything?
Unless Mr. Galna knows he's got his cornhole tournament inside already.
It's right there, yes.
Okay.
So we did discuss know it doesn't run all the time, but potentially putting a low fence, keep our young attendants to the park from running into that if the water ends up being flowing at that time. I don't know, that's gonna be, sure, expensive, but you showed the low fence for some of the other features.
Sure.
And if we have it on both sides of the graveyard wash, hopefully we can rename that too. But anyways.
That, absolutely.
Low fencing to protect from kids that run away from their parents, and
Sure.
we don't want them to end up in there.
Sure. Around the splash pad, at this level, what we're not showing in a lot of detail is some of that more detailed fencing. So the splash pad by code would need to be fenced. So that will certainly have a complete enclosure. The play spaces also should be fenced. So we will have protection along that edge. What is also along that edge is a maintenance access. We've maintained, I believe it's about 12 feet or more of space between that edge of channel and where we have any trees or any amenities to make sure that from a maintenance perspective, there's still access along that whole stretch. So we'll make sure that that's also well barricaded. And I will leave this board here, so if, it's easier to see, we have a few more things labeled on here, like the open game area and things like that. So really welcome any feedback that you all have for us. As I mentioned, our next step is to refine this based on any comments that you have so that we have what we'll call a final master plan in October. And then once we have that final plan, we can then move into that 30% design, which will help us drill down more on some of the specific details for the site, and then also give us another opportunity to relook at those costs. We'll always be back checking against cost so that we're making sure that we stay within your budget.
All right, anybody have any more questions?
So, Mayor, how do we communicate if we got any ideas or changes we have in mind? How do we
It
communicate
needs to
that?
go through John, and from John to the
If
appropriate.
there's any additional comments, send them to me.
Okay.
Because we got some already that I believe have been also incorporated and addressed this evening that, that I got additional comments from after our last meeting, so that helps me get information to them, so, and then I can let you know that I pass it along.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's going to bring us to item 9.2, water and wastewater capacity fees. The 30-day plus agenda.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So, this item is to discuss with the mayor and city council our current water and wastewater capacity fees and system practices, and receive direction regarding the future direction in regards to new construction around hookups and tie-ins to our existing city systems. The city obviously owns and operates our community water system and provides potable water to both Safford and surrounding areas. The city both the storage and distribution of that water system, along with the collection and capacity to the wastewater system. The city provides these improvements by either investing existing funds or obtaining low interest rate loans through WIFA or USDA. The city makes the upfront investment to assist with new development by oversizing infrastructure, allowing for timely hookups and tie-ins, and not create long wait times for infrastructure to be built. As development occurs and new customers connect to city infrastructure, they claim the unused capacity within the system based on their meter size. When a water meter is issued, the city is responsible to provide that location, service, both volume and pressure requirements by allocating anticipated usage in perpetuity. Developments that require higher than average volumes or higher meter counts place additional burden on the existing facilities. So the capacity fees were developed back in 2013. Our current capacity fees were developed to ensure that the new development, when it occurs, helps pay for a small portion of that infrastructure rather than transferring the majority of the cost to the existing customer. It's the recommendation of the city staff to continue current practices around water and wastewater capacity fees until a thorough rate study can be completed in order for a comprehensive understanding of the impact to the rates, budget, existing debt services, and future capital improvement projects for these departments. So our current capacity fees were based off a study that was done in December of 2013. This evening, I'm going to go through just a few slides to kind of explain how those capacity fees are built off of the information and the data that we pull from the system itself. Usually these rate studies are done on a 5-year cycle time. And these standards are based on standards and the fact that the city of Safford's last study was completed in 2013, it's obviously time for us to do a new one. And so those capacity fees are based off of several different things. You have the anatomy of the cost, right? So you have your capacity fees, which is a one-time fee based on costs incurred by the city as a result of the system growth or the need for growth in the system. Then there's a base rate, which each customer pays on a monthly basis that goes towards the ongoing cost of the existing system. And then the usage rate is determined by the amount of volume that each customer uses, and there's a rate that reflects that usage. So within the costs that are associated, you have a cost recovery methodology where you oversize a facility, you put in a larger pipeline or a larger tank than is needed, and so there's capacity in the system for development in the future. You also take into account an incremental expansion, which deals with the need today. So we try and determine where the expansion is going to happen in the future, but it's a guess. It's a best guess based on where we try and push that growth to and what's available, whether it's land or facilities or infrastructure. And so you put those funds in there on a yearly basis to be able to take into account those costs that occur to react to an existing facility that wants to come online. And then you have your capital improvement plan, which is really that future planning where you're trying to put enough infrastructure out there that you can take that growth in multiple locations without putting so much capacity into the system that you're wasting money on a system that won't be used in the future. So in 2013, there was a study done, and these information and this data I pulled out of that study just so we could see exactly how those numbers were built.
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
ask me questions whenever you got them.
Where, you said the industry standards require rate studies to be done on a 5-year. Where does that standard come from?
So because most CIPs are done on a 5-year annual cycle, your capacity fees are built off of, a portion of your capacity fee is built off of your CIP projects. And so you need those CIP projects. So at that 5-year mark, all of your CIP projects should be completed that were in your 5-year. And so you would do a new study to reflect your new 5-year CIP. So there's a 5-year increment for that.
And will part of this information be useful? Our 10-year plan, we're not due, but it's not too far away. Is some of this gonna be good for that 10-year plan, or are we gonna have to pay for that cost again?
So obviously, in your CIPs, as we try and push that out to the further, you're trying to incorporate those costs. But if you do your rate study on a regular basis on that 5-year cycle, it allows the utility to respond specifically to the CIP projects that are occurring within that 5-year cycle. So as we go through this, we can see there's some of the projects that were in our CIP that occurred, and there were some that didn't occur. And so those costs were never reflected. There was no change in 2018 to reflect that some of those projects were taken out. So those capacity fees right now are a little higher than they should have been, just for the sheer fact that it wasn't done again. And so these major projects that were in the CIP were still reflecting that additional capacity and costs needed, and weren't ever updated to lower those numbers. So.
And I'm just wondering too, with us putting the sewer in for the park, is that trench gonna be utilized for anything else that you may need in the future on something? It's kinda off the
So
surface,
obviously
but-
the location of where that is, it's a grade extension and trunk line that would be needed for the south. We've already had discussions with developers further down that would like to tie into that sewer line further down the line. And so it's been talked to the engineering firm and to our engineering department that, hey, let's make sure when we put that in, we leave it at the depth, even though it'll probably cost a little more, that gives us that capacity to expand to the south. So it's part of that CIP 10-year look ahead. Where does that growth occur, or where could it grow, and not kneecap ourselves by putting it at a depth that doesn't allow us to expand further.
And any other utilities being utilized when we have that trench?
So that trench specifically, because of the wastewater, you have to have a certain spacing between those, and so you would need a different trench for water. Obviously, we already have our reclaimed water in that alignment, and so we have that already available to us in that area, but.
It's a little off the.
Nope, you're good.
Subject problem that I wanted to ask.
Appreciate the question. So just jumping back again, this is from the 2013 study. The 335 gallons was our average usage for the city of Safford customer at that point in time, and so they pulled that in. In that study, they have a cost recovery, again, from that methodology that we talked about before around storage and distribution. And so off to the right side, I put some of the projects that they put in there for that cost recovery. So the Hillcrest, Lebanon, Discovery Park, and Thunderbird tanks were all oversized for the ability to add growth in the future. And then the distribution piping was slightly upsized, so it had the ability to take that additional volume to where it needed to go. Then based off of the plan cost, again, you have storage and distribution. So you had the Bonita main upgrades, the Kempton Wellfield tie-in, the Morris cluster, the Monteith Lane upgrade. And so those pieces and those dollars specifically were based on those projects. And so now that those projects are out of our 5-year, were completed or taken out, those costs would now reflect what is in our current 5-year CIP instead of what was in the CIP in 2013 through 2018. So with those additional costs, so it's gonna be based on what we have in our CIP, where those 4 pieces of what comes in to that CIP cost. And then that 14 cents there is the cost of the study itself. So also there's a credit for the unspent, at this point in time, they were called impact fees. That was the money that we had in the budget that had been collected to pay for this increase. And so that's where you come up. So there's a net capital cost per gallon of $11.41. There's 335 gallons of an average user. And so your capacity cost per 1 meter is the $3,822. So that capacity ratio of 11.41 times your usage came up with that. And so that's where our current fee structure starts. So this is our current fee structure based on that same study that was completed. And if you look there, so you have a ratio, capacity ratio of 1 with that, again, $11.4. And that's where your proposed fee for your 3/4 inch meter comes up with a $3,822. Again, I pulled this from the study in 2013, and so you can see the original 3/4 inch connect fee was raised by $900, but every other fee associated at that time was lowered by significant amounts. So I know that's a whole lot of numbers and a whole lot of different ways of how they came up with that. I just wanted to put a fictitious example up there for an apartment complex. So if someone was putting in a 6 apartment complex, what would that capacity fee be, and then why? So if you put in a 6 apartment complex and you used a 2-inch master meter for the 6 apartments, your meter fee, your capacity fee for that 2-inch meter would be $20,373.
You said mass meter?
Master meter.
Master meter, okay, one meter.
1 meter, and then the developer takes the metering from that point on into the development.
Okay, 1 meter for the 6 apartments, okay.
And based on that 2-inch meter, your sewer capacity fee would be $11,638. for a total of $32,000 for the development to tie into these systems. Option 2, for that same facility, if they wanted to have single individual meters for each one of those apartments, you would have 6 3/4-inch meters, which at that $3,822 per meter brings you to the $22,932. And again, now you have 6 sewer connection ratios, which is just a ratio that was determined in our current code. And so your fee would then be $36,000 if you wanted the city to incur those metering responsibilities moving forward. So we went out, talked to ADEQ, and pulled some facilities in the area, and then some municipalities that serve similar number of people in their communities, just to put this on here for our fee meters. So obviously, as you can see here, we have a larger fee meter than the majority of those, other than our Apache Junction Water District, with a monthly base fee pretty much in the lower end to average in our current process. So you throw that out on the chart between your hookup fees and your monthly fees. So that through their tiering, sometimes it's really hard to see what all those costs really look like because they're tiered on different volumes. So we threw this in a chart so you could see what that looks like with your gallons going across the bottom end of that chart and the cost for that on the left side. And as you run those through those volumes of usage, the city of Safford falls again in the bottom end of that usage cost. And so there's those two different ways for the city to be able to recover those costs that are incurred for the system. How does the city of Safford distribute the cost of maintaining a healthy utility? Capacity fees are costs paid by the development, accounted for about 3.6% of our water revenues across this time frame, and 0.5% for our wastewater systems. The rest was covered by our base rate and our usage rate. We have the ability to adjust those. And again, really you just have to be able to take that whole study in so that you understand when you change your capacity fee, what does that do to your monthly fee or your base fee or your usage fee as those costs are covered. There's no one out there making their retirement off of any of this, so we're just covering our costs. So if you guys have any additional questions or any conversation that you wanted to have, again, we brought forward what is existing, what sits in our current process, and really looking for how we'd like to change it if we don't like what we have today.
Where does the impact fee money go?
So currently we don't have an impact fee. Between the 2013 fee and today, that impact fee went away.
Well, it's called an impact fee, but you're calling it a capacity fee. So where does that money go?
So the capacity fee that we bring in, again, is pulled into the system. Over that 10-year period, it accounted for about 3.6% of the cost of our CIP improvements.
Where does it go into the finance? Where does it go?
It stays within the utility specifically.
Okay, what can it be used for?
Only for the construction of the capacity systems for the system.
Right, only for the capacity of the system, right?
Yep.
And debt service on the payment, so you can you can supplement the capital project itself or the debt service that you pay on it.
So that's where it goes.
Yes.
And
currently, you pay I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Currently, as the percentages show, you pay far more in ongoing revenue to cover the cost of your capital than the capacity fees cover. So even his earlier statement about overpaying, if you recall, and again, all these things were put in place before either one of us arrived, but in the 2018 study, because the project in particular, I think it was Sanchez Road at the time, didn't proceed, we never made the second increase in that rate study. So again, the capacity fees were not revisited in 2018, but the revenues generated by them were. So what the rate consultant did was say, on average, here's your 5-year historical from the previous, here's what we anticipate your one-time money for capacity for development to be, and then they built your rates strictly on doing not capacity, not capital directly, but what the customers would pay based on a base and usage. So there-
because the city at one time picked the highest rate to add for a capacity fee or an impact fee, we chose to not even address it for 2 rate study cycles. So
Actually-
that tells you that,
Actually, one.
So,
well,
And I know
mine
it says
says
2,
2.
right,
It
and
is.
so we actually just had this discussion prior to.
So it must not, I mean, so it's like, who cares, we collect that much money anyway, so it's never really been addressed for 2 rate study cycles.
One. So I know,
Is
from
it one or is
2013
it
to,
two?
from 2, it's one. So from 2013 to 2018, Tischler-Bice addressed specifically generating a capacity fee, which you can see from his slide actually went down quite a bit. When K.R. Saline did the 2018 to 2023 study, rather than applying the formulas Tischler-Bice did, they simply did an average. So in technically addressing the capacity fee, it's only this most recent, 18 to 23, that they weren't directly addressed. So it would only be one cycle.
So to do a rate study, you have to turn in, whoever you go to bid on to do a rate study, you give them all the information.
Yes.
And
Revenues
then
and
they come back,
expenditures.
they come back and they tell you that we think you should be charging this much money. And you're like, we need it to go more. So then you hand them more information?
So, no, the way it would work is, what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll say, give me all your revenue and expenditure data, right? And they'll do it over a period of time, let's say 5 years. They'll look at that data, they'll look at the revenue generated. At that point, and the real reason you need a rate study consultant is they'll say, based on your next 5 years, both in terms of projecting your O&M and your current CIP that you would have in place at the time, and any equipment, they're going to then take the amount of revenue needed to cover those costs, and they're gonna build it into your rates. What council and what Jason, I think, is trying to say is the way those rates are built will be based on the direction you provide. So, for example, if capacity fees are something that council doesn't wanna see, and we had some discussions on development like not too long ago. And so if the desire is to reduce the amount of revenue those capacity fees provide, because maybe we're trying to encourage more development and maybe we see that as a barrier, that's how you design the rates. And there's other areas within the rates. He showed you those components. So at the time that this study was done, which was preceded my arrival, they decided on using the historical number for revenue from one-time money, which would be those capacity fees. Everything else was paid for by your rates. So again, you take whatever revenues that you're generating and you say, okay, here's my projection, here's my anticipated cost. Now we're gonna build a rate to cover those anticipated costs, because the rate is the revenue. Did I explain that well?
No, I'm just letting you explain. I'm trying to catch you in a mess up so I could.
Okay.
So you're explaining it correctly. So you gave us a fictitious example here. It's a very interesting concept you pulled out there. My whole issue is that we are having problems trying to develop here in Safford. So other places you go, the only capacity fee that they have is a water capacity fee. We're supplying the water to a lot of places, right?
We do.
We don't get to collect any of that wastewater back.
Currently, we do not.
But yet, we're hitting our own constituents twice. So we're saying, okay, we're gonna hit you at this water capacity, and then we're also gonna hit you at the sewer capacity fee too. We're gonna hit you at both of them. Because we think that, you know, I don't know, since I've been here, I don't think we've ever drilled a new well. You know, and I've been on, you know, almost 8 years, we haven't drilled a new well. I guess our water's is good enough that we don't need a new well. Haven't had a capacity change in 2 or 1 cycles. I don't know which one that is.
One.
But I have a developer in town that wants to build a 38-unit apartment complex. Hypothetical. And it was sized up by an engineer for a 2-inch water meter. A 2-inch water meter costs $27,459, right? That's for the capacity fee.
Yeah.
The sewer capacity fee for that is based off of $11,638 for a total combined, one piece of property, 38-unit apartment complex. One piece of property, 38 units. One piece of property, 38 units, okay? So a total of 39,000. So then the developer said, hypothetically, I don't want to read 38 water meters. I'd rather the city take care of all that. Still needs a 2-inch water meter, still needs a 2-inch main line, correct? That's what it's sized up by the engineer.
Correct.
So then we go back to the city. For 37 3/4-inch water meters, capacity fee, $141,414. Same piece of property, 37 units. Same piece of property, 37 units. Then you're gonna hit them, because you went with individual meters, you're gonna hit them with the sewer capacity fee based off of 37 meters, $80,771. But yet, we're trying to build friendly here in Safford. Does that sound friendly to you? I'm asking you.
So if you're asking my personal opinion, we've had multiple discussions since I came on 2 years ago about both our capacity fees and some of our verbiage within our process. And again, because these are all a balance, it's a balancing act. How do we cover our cost with the revenue that comes in? Where do you want that balance to rest? We have the ability to change it. If you wanted your capacity fee to cover 10% of the impact fee of the cost of the infrastructure, the city council could give that direction, and these capacity fees would grow significantly. If we say, hey, we don't want to have them at all, then those capacity fees could go away. But at that same time, then your base rate on a monthly and your usage tiers would have to reflect that, so that we are able to cover the costs that are associated with it, so.
But, so once again, this developer is having to pay the city for each and every line that they're bringing in, and they're also paying $409 for the purchase of the meter, times
Correct.
37, right?
Correct.
I mean, so it's not like we're saying, oh, you're paying the capacity fee and you're getting a meter. No, they're paying for the whole thing, but yet we're not. So I don't know that we really answered my question is this friendly? Is this a friendly environment to want to develop here?
So I think
by adding this
there's a
thing?
couple things there. One, I think the question really isn't whether it's friendly in the sense that it's an operation that needs to be funded. And I think that the discussion that we're having tonight is to get input from council to say that, based on the preceding study, this is what was approved. If we want to go in a new direction, what we have to decide is, so let's say we're generating, on any given year in water, anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000 in capacity fees, right?
Well, I would like to know what the number is just for Safford, not outside of Safford.
Okay, and I think we could probably get that for you.
Yeah, we
We'll
could
have to
Because
find
it wouldn't
that.
be that much, because there hasn't been that much development here.
Right, but I mean, in total going into the fund. And so the generic question that you want to ask is, how do we want to distribute the cost of delivering that service, right? And the idea behind the capacity fee is saying that as new users come online, it puts additional burdens on the system. And so we're charging them a different fee for that additional burden up front, so that the existing customers don't pay for that additional burden. Now, you can use that, not use it.
Let me stop you for a second, because
Okay.
to an extent you're correct, but to an extent you're also not correct, because there's a 2-inch meter hypothetically going to this property. There's
Yes.
2-inch line.
Yep,
That 2-inch line's gonna cover 37 3/4-inch lines.
right.
So it's the volume
And you're still gonna
requirements.
charge the capacity fees of each 3/4-inch line. So let me just tell you, so the total amount was $237,318 versus just going with the 2-inch meter and one sewer tap, $32,683.
So
That's a huge increase,
it definitely is.
huge increase.
And the way the fee structure is based on the difference between a 3/4 inch meter. So when you say you have a 3/4 inch meter, again, there's a certain volume that's associated with that meter that the city is handing to that individual. You have this much volume and this much pressure in
You're still bringing a
perpetuity.
2-inch line in.
It's the same,
still a
it's the
2-inch
same
line.
volume of water usage, but it's not as far as what's delineated specifically for that meter. That meter says, I have to provide this in perpetuity because of that size of that meter. 335 gallons. Now, the 2-inch is sized by an engineer for an apartment, which is based specifically on the number of facilities, sinks, toilets
Right.
that fall within it. And so in this scenario, a 2-inch meter had the volume to provide everything needed for those apartments. But as soon as you put an individual meter on it, the city has to be able to provide in perpetuity that 335 gallons per day. It's just what's required.
Is 335, this is way off topic, but is 335 gallons provided up there at the branding iron?
Yeah.
Yeah?
The branding iron, I believe, has a 2-inch meter.
No, I'm talking about any of the property up there.
So
Because I know for a
all
fact
the
that
properties that are up there have the 20 PSI minimum requirement by the ADQ that we can't provide a service if we can't meet that flow rate and that pressure.
So they need to find out what that flow rate is, because if it's not 335.
So
then-
335 over a
Gallons, then we
24-hour
have an
period
issue.
is like, what, 12 gallons an hour? That's a couple trips out of your sink, but.
So anyway, I just feel like we're doing an injustice for development with this kind of
And I
numbers.
I agree with you.
I understand the purpose of capacity fees. I understand, I'm calling them impact fees. I understand the purpose of that. I don't understand why the city, at one time when they bought into this, they jumped on the highest percentage. I think it's really neat that you gave us different places that are what they're charging. You know, you got Sapwood charging $3,822 for a 3/4 inch meter. You have Graham County Co-op charging $500. A new one's $500. Douglas $1,400. Payson $500. Sholo $1,700. And so I understand the process, and I also understand that city's also going to throw a curveball in there by saying that we lost the 200 homes down there in Central. That's going to possibly affect the water when we go for a water study. And then you're going to say, well, we're throwing in, if we lose these impact fees as well, then that's going to increase everybody's water rates by X amount of dollars.
So Mayor,
bill-
can
the
I
bill of
just throw
goods-
this back up for you real quick?
ahead.
So the majority of the costs that are associated with are really based on the CIP projects. So as you see in this 2013 study, $13.45 was just from CIP projects. It doesn't have anything to do with the number of customers that are on the system. So you have your plan-based capital costs, so you have your storage and distribution in there, and those were based off of those CIP projects. And so that's where the majority of that fee comes from, is to cover those CIP projects themselves. So obviously, those were done. I mean, we built 4 or 5 huge water tanks for storage, right, and distribution piping to cover that. And so that's what was in that capacity fee. I truly believe if we look at what we have in our CIP today and over our next 5 years, that these fees would drop even more just based on what we have in our CIP today.
So, I mean, in general, I think that, and again, we haven't heard a lot from everybody, but I think the general impression is that if we go out for a rate study, we'd like to see capacity fees be lower. And the idea behind the capacity fees being lower would be to try and encourage development. Now, in the case of water, obviously everybody's paying them, so that can't be the difference between development or not. But I think the idea is, in general, that is something that would be desirable.
Extent to which the rest of the customers will foot that bill?
Well, and again, I think the difficult part about capacity fees is it's always gonna be predicated on whatever your expenditure pattern is anticipated to be. So if I go back and I look at, say, Sanchez Road, which was in the previous 5-year study, it's nowhere near the cost that we're looking at now. Of course, you end up paying on the debt service. So it's hard to know exactly what that cost would be. I mean, the only way to know is to assess the capacity fee, generate a number, and then say, this amount of money would have been paid by everyone if we had a capacity fee that we then took away. You know what I mean? So
Right.
you're either gonna have it in the study or you're not. And so there are a lot of moving parts. There's the cost of the projects that have changed. It's our real attempts, and this is why I've been pressing so hard on the CIP not being a wish list, because if I send that wish list to the rate consultant, they're gonna build your rates on all the projects that are in that CIP. Are you gonna build them? Right? That's another question. The costs change over time, and then the other issue is gonna be a couple of things. One is, how much do you want new development to pay for itself, quote unquote, right? That's a big part of the process. So that's a question that the council has to answer in terms of what they're comfortable with. I mean, we had a similar conversation as it regards the electric system and the use of solar. Do we want a separate solar fee for administration for those who have solar, or do we want a base rate that's higher to cover the cost? And based on the amount of money that we're generating right now on capital, the impact is minimal because the amount of money being generated is minimal. If development were to take off and you were to have much bigger numbers, the absence of that capacity fee would be, pardon my pun, but more impactful, right? The more you develop and the more capital comes online, the bigger the demands on the system outside of those who are simply using it. So it all depends on the rate study at the time you do it, you know, and what are we saying? Are we saying that current capacity fees we want to change, and therefore the difference to them is going to be the variance between those two amounts? It's hard to answer your question
Right.
in any real way.
But either way, it's safe to say that, well, I guess it's not even safe to say that, because you don't know what kind of new construction we're gonna get, and.
Right, and the bottom line is that the reason that rates are constructed by subcomponents, one of which being capacity fees, is they're trying to target the impact in terms of the cost to your system. So the capacity fee is designed to take some of the upfront sting out of the expansion that goes with putting that additional infrastructure. Now, it could be, it's not just the value of that infrastructure, it's the impact. So maybe I need more storage tanks, or I need to start drilling more wells, right? So the reason the capacity fees are there is because they're addressing a different cost impact to the system, as opposed to, I use so many gallons a day, and I pay a certain rate for it, kind of a thing.
Right.
So they each address a different component. You look like you're...
I really would like to know what that number is for Safford, instead of, because you put on here capacity fees in 2022 accounted for only 3.63% of water revenue. I'd like to know what that is from Safford, from the city of Safford.
Okay, we can get that for you, Mayor.
That's in-house instead of everywhere.
And it would be even less, right?
It would be a lot less. So
Yeah.
then why do you need them?
And and again, we're not disagreeing with that concept. What we're trying to do is get your feedback so that if we go forward with a new rate study, we understand how we want the rates to be structured. If the goal is to lower the capacity fees because they're seen as unfriendly and a red flag to people who want to develop, then we can adjust those rate structures. But again, then you're going to spread that cost out. Now, the impact of Central, the impact of shifting water from watering the fairgrounds to effluent, right? Those are gonna hit you no matter what, right? But again, if the emphasis is on lowering capacity fees in the rate study, then we can design a rate to reflect that. We can design a study around that.
My idea of us trading Central was the water for gas was, we didn't wanna come up with say $4 million to improve that infrastructure out there, and we would never recoup the cost. So we traded for that east of town, where we were more likely to be able to build, and south, where we were more likely to be able to build in the future. And that's why I felt like we made that trade, so we wouldn't have to put that millions into upgrading Central and never recoup our monies. That was one of the factors, I believe.
Right, but you lost 200 homes,
About 246.
and then we also lost the influent, we lost, water in the ponds at whatever route that's going. So when the new rate study comes out, that's all gotta be contributed in there as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, more than likely, whenever that rate study's done, your water rates are gonna increase.
I certainly
I'm
hope not.
pretty confident they're gonna increase.
But what is it you,
Nothing ever goes down, Arnold.
no.
Well, they're definitely
those
gonna increase if the
capacity
capacity fees go down.
What, no, because but the capacity fees are only
Right,
3.63%
if the
of the
number's
water
not crazy.
revenue. It's a number issue.
Right.
So,
But
I
again,
mean,
depending
it's-
on the projections,
And remember, what it's gonna be is whatever the city sends them
right.
for the rate study. You heard John
Well,
say
and
that too.
I think an important point is that we need our CIP to reflect what we're gonna actually do and not have these numbers based on projects that are gonna get kicked down the road.
And is that your main concern, Mayor, is you want to lower the fees
No,
to be more friendly?
my main concern is why are you penalizing one piece of property? I understand development of houses, I get that all day long. But when
Yeah.
you have one piece of property that's having units put in it, I don't get the fact why, when an engineer comes and says it takes a 2-inch line to feed, I'm gonna use his fictitious
There would also
example.
be more construction involved if you were building.
You're paying for it though.
But if you were building a subdivision with 38 homes versus a apartment complex, the construction is gonna be more at the subdivision.
Absolutely on the housing
And
construction.
so I can see your point there. You're more centrally located.
Right.
That brings up a question. But these fees in a subdivision is a lot more construction involved.
Absolutely,
And more
and
cost.
generally that falls in, well, that
Yeah,
100% falls in the development, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's where.
And so this here would be the same thing with this development, would be that the developer has to put in all the stubs, and then the city comes and hooks up the meter. They just come in and drop their $409 meter on a 2-inch line with T's coming off of it. They come and hook that up, and they wanted to charge that kind of capacity
that
fee.
You're more centrally located with your.
So that's my,
than you are
I'm
the-
not saying to do away with capacity fees. I'm saying they need to be lowered all across the board. But I do think that there should be some kind of, something on actual development on a central location, like what you're saying.
And would that
Or
go?
maybe, I'm sorry.
Would that go in line with, we stay the way with the recommendation, that we stay where we're at till we have a study?
Absolutely, well, a study needs to be done, absolutely. But I think that, development-wise, I mean, I remember back in the day, and it didn't happen, when the fire department, the fire riser lines that came up, of course, we did away with those, but that was an impact fee as well on that. And the city had a grant program where I met Napa Auto. They were the last recipients to get that. And I remember Dean Craig tried to get it, and the council rejected that one. But they did approve Napa's, and they reimbursed him. So he had to pay for all of the infrastructure to get to it, and then the city reimbursed him for that. And I don't know what it was. I think it was $60,000 or $80,000. And then the city reimbursed him, but the city council chose not to reimburse Dean Craig on his ventures going down there.
Well, I do have to get with you and pick your brain more about where you're coming from, but you don't mind the recommendation they've made.
Did they make a recommendation?
They make a recommendation. It's the recommendation of the city staff to continue current practices around the water and wastewater capacity fees until a thorough rate study can be completed.
Well, I'm not in favor of that, no.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
asking you, because I know
Because,
you're
I
not
mean,
crazy about those.
if you got a developer that wants to start by this year, this is going to affect them.
So Mayor and Council, there's multiple ways that these fees could be constructed. So this was based off an average usage across the nominal usage here in Safford itself. As an engineer, you have the ability to go in and count fixtures within a house, and you could base your fee off of what that fixture count looks like, and so your capacity fee would be based on specific to each individual one. When you do that, now you're gonna incur additional costs through the city because each one of those facilities have to be specifically inspected and double-checked across those counts, where right now it's just a flat fee, there you go. We're giving you a 3/4 inch meter, here you go.
I don't know if that's correct. When I pull a house permit, they don't do what you're just asking.
That's what I'm saying. We could change it to where you're counting a fixture cost, and then your water volume would reflect exactly what that house could use by what infrastructure was built in the house specifically. But as you do that, now a trailer is gonna be a cheaper connection than that, right? Because you're gonna have a little shower that gives off half a gallon a minute, and your fee would be much less to hook up a little fifth wheel trailer than it would be a full house.
Yeah, I'm willing to lower the, capacity fees, and then that needs to reflect the new rate study that needs to come out. But, I'm also wanting us to address, if the council feels that it even needs to be addressed, that, a piece of property like this, getting that kind of money is just absolutely asinine to me. It really truly is. And I'd fight for anybody for this kind of a deal. Councilman McGoy, I want to hear from you.
Well, I have issues with what we're calling things, because if you run a 2-inch water line and it puts out X amount of gallons, or you run 38 or 37 3/4 inch lines and it puts out the same amount of water, that is capacity, the gallons of water.
Sure.
That's an impact fee, anything above that, but we can't call it that. So,
But 38 3/4 inch meters are gonna put out significantly more water than 1 2-inch. Just
can't
does.
if it's coming from that same 2-inch
If you only
line.
pull a
Right,
2-inch
only in
line.
theory, not in practice.
That's what
is
I'm trying to
you're
say.
saying.
You're only
It could.
pulling a 2-inch line.
The
but-
potential is there.
But if these are apartments with somebody who's working shift work and comes by for a shower 3 times a week, it's not realistic. You know, I mean, I wish they'd take 4 showers a week, but they won't do it.
I agree with you.
Jamie, you started that. No, it's an impact fee, even whether we can call it that or not, because you gotta guarantee it for 100 years, and because you need to buy another well, and we need to drill another well, and we need to. But it sounds like we're not doing any of that. Maybe it's because we don't have the building going on, we're not adding on to our system.
Yeah, currently the volumes aren't needed. We have a CIP project that we're working on right now to rehabilitate one of the wells that allows us to use our existing well and bring it into the system, where it pushes the arsenic levels into the acceptable range, and we're bringing that well into the system currently in our CIP, so.
I don't like the scenario that the mayor brought up, though. I mean, if we're gonna put automatic readers on there, it's not gonna cost us anymore. They're gonna pay for all those automatic readers, all those, every part of that, they're gonna pay for. I don't really understand why we need a couple $100,000 extra out of that. Unless we're buying a well, or less, and maybe we are, I don't know.
Well, and again, 2 years into this, I can't say I've constructed anything in that process, other than looking in 2022, that 3.6% is all the capacity fee that we put towards the CIP projects that were completed in 2022. So there's not a significant number coming from those capacities as far as revenue. The revenue's coming from our base fee and our tier usage.
I can see why that number is small, because we're not building anything. What'd you say it was, 3%?
Almost 4.
6.3.
Yeah.
if we were building enough houses to supply the need we have right now, then there would be a lot of money in that fund. And in theory, we would be spending it quite quickly.
On those
So I
expansion
can see,
projects.
I can see both ends of it. I don't know what the fix is, but that's gotta be hard to swallow for the developer.
Well, the fix may be, if you do a rate study, maybe if I do a multi-unit dwelling, it's not treated in the same way that a single-family residential unit is. And that's
Yeah,
something
it
you could
probably
build.
shouldn't be. And I
And,
wanna- I
and
wanna-
again, so this highlights that, but that's the design, and we've run into this on a number of occasions. We ran into it in a different way on the solar side. And so by getting this feedback, it gives us the opportunity to address this issue. And maybe when you design the next rate study, maybe multifamily dwelling units are treated different as capacity, because simply having more meters doesn't mean you're using more water. You're still using the same amount of water. So logically, it makes no sense. But strictly implementing the way that the rate study was written is saying the potential is there. Well, the reality is you're not gonna do that. So maybe we make an adjustment to the way we treat a multifamily unit. If it's beyond a certain number or a certain number of units, you don't address it in the same way. You address it maybe at the entrance point at which the main
I
water
think-
supply.
I think you're onto something, John, in that sense, and that's because, first of all, an engineer has to come and size everything, right? Engineer's gonna say a 38-unit apartment complex or whatever is gonna take a 2-inch water main,
Right,
and that's gonna feed all of them.
Yep.
And it's also gonna take a 6-inch sewer main, one tap, 6-inch sewer main. And
Yes.
it's gonna run at 80% capacity, filling it all up, but yet that's what it is. So that's all that developer should pay on that for a multifamily, one piece of property, and then you do it from there, and then if they want to come in and add every single, sewer clean out and every single water turnout, that's that's the developer. And then the city just comes in, says, here's your bill for $409 for that 5/8 meter, and we move on. And we just charge that one capacity of $32,683.
And again, I think, you know,
Instead of $237.
even my conversations with our utility director, as we discussed, and I think we discussed a little bit, you know, in passing, the rate study needs to be adjusted. And I think the issues that are being raised here are issues that can be adjusted in that new rate study. Just like we've been adjusting the CIP and saying, stop putting everything under the sun in there and then not building it, because it's going to impact your rates. So again, this kind of feedback is valuable because it's going to impact, the way that rate study comes back to you and addresses some of these issues. Multifamily dwellings that are multiple units are not the same as a single-family residential. And if, it doesn't matter whether the water's coming in through a master meter or going to each apartment, you're not gonna use more water than you use.
Right.
But the way the rates are structured, we're charging them for every one of those things. And again, I think the other side of this is how much of a cost does the city absorb in terms of maintaining those facilities? Now,
Well, that's on their base usage, though. You can't use that.
Well, no,
because
no,
You pay a monthly standby fee, period.
what I'm saying is that we're addressing multiple meters. So again, as Councilman Goy pointed out, a lot of ways we read now is we're not even going every meter. So even the administrative overhead, which maybe back in the day, somebody went to each meter, we don't do that either. So even those costs aren't there. So again, I'm increasing the viability of the position, not arguing against it.
Okay.
And so again, I think it's one of those things where we have to look at this kind of feedback and have that impact the way we structure the rates, because we do have the ability to do that.
Well, I just know that this developer is 100% total electric. You know, I mean, if you did individual meters, it gives, and they don't pay for it, it's easy for the city to shut off the water instead of shutting off the power in case they were on oxygen. Then you have to worry about a whole new can of worms on all of that stuff. And so I just think this is a win-win, but now we've got to figure out a way that we can make it multifamily, like what you were saying, how we can do that. And that's really simple because for this plan to pass any of you guys in the round table, You need to know what size is the engineer has pulled in for water, what size the engineer has pulled in for sewer, and then that's gotta be checked by Morgan, and he's gonna sign off on it, or he's gonna say, no, according to my calculations, you're gonna need a 3-inch meter, or you're gonna need a 3-inch line to
Right.
feed those homes. So he's gonna make the suggestion that you go back and you change that from a 2 to a 3. No biggie, that's fine, we'll change it to that, and then here's your new capacity fee is 3. Great. Times 38, wanna pay for 409 meters. So,
Right, and
I think you're on
again-
the right track, but I think that needs to happen.
Again, that's why we're here. We're trying to get feedback on this. I mean, the logic behind multiple meters, if capacity is in fact addressing capacity, and it's not changing, but the cost is changing significantly, there's a disconnect fundamentally
disconnect.
between those two things.
There is.
I wanna just throw one other thing out there, since this is a work session, but, and I don't trust my memory anymore, but it seems to me like when we put that sewer plant down there, a rate study was done, and we all had to kick in $35 a month to pay for that place. And we were told that that was gonna go away as soon as it was paid for. I wanna know, I mean, I know the federal government or paid the last payment a couple of years ago. I don't remember my rates going down any. I think they actually went up. Was that a fact, and if so, where are those monies going? Do we have enough money sitting someplace to build the other half of that system, or where are we at on that?
I think
I'd like-
wastewater is in good shape, and I think there might be some ability to look at those rates. And again, just talking off the top of my head, there may be a potential to reduce, because the overall usage right now, that is at about half. And so, I think that we've got our fund balance requirement, we've got some money above the line, and there's not a whole lot of additional infrastructure issues right now. But again, if we would have to wait and look at it with the rate study.
We're talking about potentially taking on some more, and I don't wanna cut that off if we're gonna need it, but
Right.
I know we were told that, this thing's gonna be $35 a month until it's paid for, and then it's gonna drop back to 12 or 15, and instead it's gone up another $3.
So,
I
Mayor,
think how it goes up too, Councilman McGoy, is it's based off of what I end up using above what the base rate is for my water. So if I use more water than what my base was, then that means I'm also sending it back to the sewer plant. So therefore, that's why my sewer adjusted. But you are correct, they
There's
did
no way
say
that,
that.
I mean, my 4 showers a week is not causing that. There's no way I'm getting a bump.
so Mayor.
I agree, mine
Okay.
did too, you better check mine.
Councilman McGoy, again, the last time those fees were reviewed were back in 18, and so it's been 5 years since that, and I'm not sure exactly when that sewer treatment plant was paid off specifically, but once that payment changes, now your long-term debt has decreased, and so those fees would obviously go down in
So a
reflection of
rate
that.
study would deal with that.
Yep.
Yes.
It's time then.
And it definitely is time, and I think there's some things that were missed, that I'd like to see revisited. Tischler Bice is a very well-known and well-used firm to do capacity fees, impact fees. And I think that they probably sharpen their pencil a little bit more, and I think we'll have an opportunity now to go out and make sure we get somebody, because there are a number of issues that we need to address in water. We've had some of those discussions as well, and so we need somebody who really has some experience with water. And it may be that there's some offsets that we can use, going forward, so that it's not all of an increase. Maybe there's some savings in some of the, we'll have to take a look.
Is there I know we gotta treat everybody the same. Is there a way we can deal with this specific situation before our rate study, or are we at the mercy of that?
I think in order to have equity, I think you have to do what you're doing now and continue to do what you're doing now.
So how fast can this thing happen?
How fast can this thing happen? It's gonna take some
It'll
time.
take 3 months for a rate study.
It'll take some
Well,
time.
just to get the contract done and through the process, just to get the rate study started would probably push us into January of next year before we could even, we got to go out, put it out on the market, get everybody's costs back, bring them before you guys, before it ever even starts, so. If I had to guess, you're probably 6 months before a rate study could be completed.
I'm glad you had a smaller number in your head than I did.
Yeah, that's a pretty upbeat estimate, I think.
I'd put it on the fast lane for you.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of wiping out impact fees. And you guys are shocked at that, I'm sure. And the reason why I'm not in favor of wiping them out is because we have water that goes in other places than just the city. But I do think that number is too high, and I think it's always been too high. I think when it was presented to the city, the council, they're like, here's this number, this is what we want, and they all said, let's go with it and do it. I think that number is ready to be adjusted, and I think there's other avenues to look into to bring to bring us into line where we can see some development. I mean, you know, it's interesting that we want to spend $1.5 million on utilities to a beautiful park that other developers get a hook into. And I just think that's really interesting, but when you have a developer that's ready to rock and roll, we're like, yeah, show me the money. I just don't get that. I don't get it at all.
It's the way they built the rates. It's the way they constructed it.
I also can see though that we can't run a 3-inch sewer line up there to that park and then have to turn around and put a 10-inch in 2 years from now when somebody up there wants to develop.
Right.
We can't do both either, so I think
It's part of that
historically,
methodology.
we've always oversized in hopes that would need it.
Well, I mean, if
While
we-
you've got the trench open, a bigger pipe don't cost a whole lot.
That 100% true. But according to I mean, if we really wanted to, according to our rules, we're far enough away from any sewer tap that we could put a leach line in. We could do that. We don't have to tie into the sewer. We could save 1.5 million and spend 500,000 on putting a septic system in.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'd
I'd leave that one up to our engineering department. I'm not sure how far away your septic system would have to be away from the graveyard wash or whatever. but-
It's only so many, you can pass, you could pass that. I guarantee you could pass that.
You can
But-
make it happen for
but we're
about
s-
$40,000 roughly.
Yeah, but, I mean, versus 1.5 million, I mean, and see, my whole point is if we're doing that, then the developer that's going to tie into that needs to pay for that development fee all the way up to that part. I just know that when I had to do business before with REA, and, we went underground, and anybody that hooked up, and I paid for the complete infrastructure, and anybody that hooked up had to pay a percentage of that back to me.
So there is another process that they call them an improvement district, where you have that ability for the developer to get some of their costs back as other people hook into that. I've seen it in multiple locations. There's lots of ways you can structure how that funding goes. I think the $1.5 million is a perfect example. The city would be fronting that $1.5 million, and then we're gonna be charging somebody $20,000 to hook into it.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the capacity fee. And so are you ever gonna get your full $1.5 million back? Not in capacity fees, you won't, but in those service fees over the years, and then providing that service to those individuals brings additional monies and other revenue avenues into the city, for sure. But our capacity process and our fee structures is pretty elementary. It doesn't have a lot of moving wheels. There's not a lot of bells and whistles in it. It's pretty big hammer to drop, and it's just,
I think we
that's how it is.
beat this up, but I will ask you this, John. We could bring this back to a vote as an action item to change the verbiage to allow for a apartment complex.
I don't know if we can alter the existing rate structure in that way. I think if Capacity fees are.
Our attorney's on the phone, can't we ask him?
Yeah, let's ask him. Bill?
No, you can't. The reason, I know you all have been calling them impact fees. Impact fees are terribly complicated and very expensive, and the only winners are people like Tischler. So and that's an entirely different statute. So all the smaller cities and towns have moved to capacity fees, which allows you to accomplish an impact fee, but under the statute that deals with rates. So you have to deal with capacity fees, just like you do rates. You can't change it independently. You need to have a study. The report you got tonight really summed it up well. Capacity fees are a way you make sure that new construction is paid for by new developers, and you don't shift the risk to the rest of the community. And you're required. Then I think you're required to monitor and look at it and make sure you pay the amounts appropriately. So no, you can't do it now. You have to do it as part of the rate study.
Okay. All right.
Appreciate having this discussion, though. We need to do this more often on a whole lot of subjects.
Well, and I think that we will be doing that, and I think that this, I'm calling in my meetings the tip of the spear, because I think this is where I'm trying to get a better read on council, where we want to go. Rate studies are a big impact on development, but development is a conversation all on its own. Code enforcement is part of that conversation, so we will be having more of these types of conversations.
So, bring me back a RFQ for the rate study. Could we have that in before the end of this year?
Next meeting. No, I'm kidding.
I would like to ask for it next meeting, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
You'll get it like you got that report.
Obviously, it's a council priority, so let's see what we can do and get this fast-tracked and see how quick we can move on it.
I think that'd be nice to see, just for, we just need to get this rate study done. It's been too long. But is there any other study you wanna do at the same time, or you wanna just do the water? You wanna do water,
I think,
wastewater?
let us take a look at that. I mean, water, I think, is the one that has changed the most and will be most uniquely impacted. The only question I would have is if we do more than one, it will slow the process down, but it also may balance out some of the costs too, depending.
I almost feel like water and wastewater
Yeah.
should go pretty much hand in hand.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I do believe we have to also send notifications to Thatcher that we're sending
We need to
down
get
the right.
we need to get their agreement on the vendor chosen.
Yeah.
For water.
All right, thank you. Close the work session, reconvene into regular city council meeting. Item 11.1, B.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for Mayor and City Council to review and approve the September 11th, 2023 City Council minutes.
I'll make the motion, we approve the minutes from September 11th, 2023, Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
On page 44, when I talked about the P-card report and tried to encourage the employees to, the new employees to be told to shop in Safford, the way the verbiage is, it sounds like I'm saying to only shop in Safford. That's not what I'm saying. I want them to realize that make their first attempt in Safford and then go other places if that's what we need to do. But make their first attempt in Safford, not, employees may need to be reminded to shop within the city limits of Safford. That almost sounds like I'm asking them to only shop there, and I don't want that to be the view. I mean, for them to think that.
So noted, I think that needs to be changed, that,
Well,
I think what you're asking for is that they shop, they think of shopping here first, I mean, but honestly, don't, if you need to run across this town to grab
Yeah.
something, get it, make it happen.
Yes,
But think of here first, right?
yes.
Can you make that change, please?
Yes, Mayor.
And then would
Can-
you send him a email with that
Revised,
change,
yes.
please?
Can staff hear that change, that, That's not what I meant.
Okay. You, department heads, will you make sure you get that to the right? Councilman Lopez, is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Please get that to your employees and make that happen. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to item 12.1, contracts for services. For Cassell, John Casella.
Good evening,
You in
Mayor.
partnerships with this
You
company or
you-
what?
You forgot who I was.
Yeah, I did.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Staff is seeking approval by Mayor and Council to engage in a contract for services with Cassell. City currently contracts with Cassell for our enterprise resource planning software that supports our core business activities such as financial services. Contract being presented would provide for separate back office services that would support general ledger and payroll functions. Staff recommends approval of the contract. The background, given volatility in the labor markets and ongoing challenges in hiring qualified applicants, it has become increasingly difficult to maintain a consistently trained staff in certain positions. This issue has been an ongoing challenge in specialized positions, particularly where there are few and in some cases only one position citywide. Contract as presented would provide for payroll support services as well as general ledger services. Charges are on a per-use basis, and the budget being presented is assuming full use for the remainder of the year. While that level of use is unlikely, it is preferred that we provide for maximum coverage so as not to risk under budgeting for the anticipated services. Staff is therefore asking for use of $63,000 in general fund contingency appropriations to cover the cost of the contract, and I broke out, based on 20 pay periods, which we are now less than that at this point. I show cost per usage for each of those services. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody have any questions? Entertain a motion to, we have a motion.
Second.
And a motion and a second to approve the contract for services for Cassell. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I think this is a well-needed
Appreciate
item
that.
for you, and I appreciate that you guys looked into it and said, hey, just in case.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 13.1, ordinance 2311. Jamie?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for a second reading and approval of ordinance 023-011, an ordinance of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, rezoning Graham County Assessor parcels 101-08-001 from the R2 Multiple Family Residential District to the C2 Highway Commercial District. The Planning and Zoning Commission has had a public hearing as well as the City Council on September 11th. As of today's date, staff has received no comments from the public. The procedure for map amendment rezone has been completed, and staff is recommending approval of the ordinance. There's a map on the projector of the area if you have any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Jamie?
I move we approve ordinance 023-11.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the ordinance 2311 on the rezone, and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Would you read that in, Lee?
Approval of ordinance number 023-011, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, effectuating a map amendment rezoning Graham County Assessors Parcel 101-08-001 from City of Safford R2 Multiple Family Residential District to C2 Highway Commercial District.
Kim and Debbie, thank you. And we appreciate your guys' business in Safford and look forward to you guys keep on growing. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, B. Brings item 14, financial reports, P card report. Councilman Lopez?
I just I think I'm noticing that Cherish is being trained for grant writing. I just wondered if that's part of your deal there, Chief. Looks like it. Hopefully so, because we need grant writers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilman Lopez, she was scheduled and the training was canceled, and so it was reimbursed.
Okay. Well,
But we plan to try and get her back into that specifically for the police department,
Yes.
not throughout the city, just to make that kind of clear.
good. You gotta keep an eye out for you guys too.
Where's the love? You don't share?
Well, yeah, we'll share.
Thank you, Chief.
Anything else on the Pete Card report?
No, sir.
How about expenses over 5,000? How about revenues over 5,000? We good on them?
Good on.
All right, brings us to item 15, report on operational items. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to introduce you to our school resource officer, Officer Schreiner. He's going to give you some information in respect to what he does basically on a daily duty at the schools, as well as some information in reference to bullying, the process that the school does have already in place, and how we interact with them. So I'll turn it over to him, and then when he's through, I can stay up for some questions if there are any.
Mayor Coates, Councilman, good evening. I'm Officer Schreiner, Safford Police Department, currently assigned as the school resource officer for the Safford School District. Currently, I'm in charge of patrolling the 6 campuses with roughly a population of 2,900 students, and give or take 400 staff. When it comes to the staff, I'm involved in training. We train on safety and security measures within the school system, as well as a program that the nation has went to in school settings. In this day and age, we have to start training for mass shootings in school. We see it all the time. And I also train them on the ALICE program, which Mr. Arbizo there is also a facilitator of that. As an SRO, school resource officer, there's 3 hats that I primarily wear when doing these duties. Number 1, of course, is law enforcement. Provide a safe, secure environment for staff, for students, visitors, visiting teams, so on and so forth, as well as investigate crimes, criminal damage, thefts, fights, private property accidents, and there's a lot of them there at the high school as well. So first and foremost, that's the main hat I wear. Secondly, I'm an informal counselor, mentor, and mediator. I've sat in with counselors within the school system that when they have to bring in kids and parents to try to mediate to get them on the right track, whatever the case may be, okay? Mentor, that's why I like to be around the schools after hours, parent-teacher conferences, games, so on and so forth. I refer to it as boots on the ground, meeting parents, letting them know that we are a presence there on the campus. I've been in some arenas where that's not taken very well. I've been to some conferences where, some parents feel that police on campus are more of a nuisance. And depending where they are on that, it's up in the air. Some are for it, some are against it. Here in the Safford area, I've had very good feedback from parents as well and teachers, and it seems like it's a push to a good thing for us. I know in some certain areas they don't like it. And the third hat that I wear, public safety educator. And what I mean by that is inform on various law-related issues relevant to school-age children, teens, so on and so forth. Speak a lot about the problems we're having with, and we'll address here in a little bit regarding maybe some bullying, the social media issues that we have, the TikTok challenges, Facebook harassment, and stuff that we are dealing with now that when we all were in school didn't even exist. But these are where we're at nowadays, okay? And those are some of the hats that I wear within the school system. Now you'll see me in the morning, along with Chief and Captain Clough, patrolling the school zones, monitoring traffic and stuff like that. That doesn't go unnoticed, and we're still very active in that as well. Chief Avila had asked me to kind of put together and speak about, I guess the topic tonight was going to be bullying within the schools. We did some research, and you'll be pleased to know that there are programs being implemented in the school and taught in the school on a daily basis. I spoke with an advocate from the district office that Mr. Taylor had put me in contact with, and meeting at great length with her, she kind of shared some stuff with me. Currently, all K through 6 students participate in, the program is called Capturing Kids' Hearts. And that gives specific lessons are taught weekly throughout the month. And they're taught weekly, and many sessions are done daily for K through 6 at all schools. Once a month, the facilitator visits each class to go over the criteria or the curriculum that was given that month. Each month, there is a certain topic that they touch on. August was managing emotions. September, empathy. October, self-direction, teamwork, responsibility, respect, kindness, and the list goes on. And secondly, for those that are in those groups and those that teachers kind of flag, for lack of a better term, of maybe needing some more, maybe an individual counseling or something within a group, those that are struggling with their behaviors and becoming more bully-like, if you will, for lack of a better term. She does small groups and individual counseling that are held for selected students in smaller groups. So this, in a nutshell, it is being taught. There are bullying programs being taught currently, actively, daily, weekly within our Safford School District. As the only SRO responsible for 6 campuses, it is tough for me to implement or teach those programs because I'm only one person and there's over 2,900 kids, right? And sometimes I get called from one area to another. But it was comforting knowing that these type of programs are going on in the school daily. Okay? There's another issue that I'd like to bring up, but is there anything you guys want to ask me on the bullying first of all, or address?
So teachers kind of help you by flagging?
Yeah, and I don't like the word flagging.
I know you don't, I don't either, but
that way we
I'm
don't
sorry,
see like
I
we're
won't use that. But
picking them out. But yeah, when they go through these groups, and this is what the advocate was telling me, is when they go through these groups and they see kids that are struggling with more aggressive behavior or someone they think, well, that kid's probably the bully of the group, for lack of a better term, okay? They break them down into smaller groups to address their behavior as opposed to just doing it in a large group. And those are more condensed, more personal type, one-on-one setting. That was comforting to know as well. If I have a little time, I'd like to touch on another subject, if you guys don't mind.
Absolutely.
Did you have? Oh, it's definitely a school issue that we're facing currently, and it'll be 2 minutes. If you guys don't mind if I approach that way?
No.
For those of you guys who don't know, these are vapes. Many teachers think that these are highlighters or the old correction tape that we used to use when in typing and whatnot, okay? Back to the bully thing. Since school started in July, I probably have maybe 2 cases that are going through the court system. Since school started in July, this has been taken from, 3 of these have been taken from elementary school.
Wow.
And the rest have been taken from the middle school and the high school. Those are nicotine vapes, THC vapes, and this right here is, from what I'm seeing, being in the school, and Mr. Diesel probably as well.
Do you have the highlighter one?
What's that?
The highlighter one?
I don't have one here.
You know?
But I have the small canister, it looks like a, that is the biggest issue that we're dealing with in the school right now. And I'm sure you guys all know what vapes are. They're electronic cigarettes that came out. Some are nicotine flavored, some is THC. They're rechargeable, and when you hit the button, the battery creates the vape from the wax or the nicotine chemical within there, and then they just suck it in, and what we're seeing now is they'll blow the smoke into their shirt or into their hoodie, and they're doing it in class. And this year alone, this has come out of the school since July. The Safford Middle School and the Safford High School have put vape detectors in the bathrooms to detect this. And that's where we're going these days, this day and age, to have to catch that and counteract that. It's a huge deal. We don't know what the main effects are gonna be. We won't know for years. Back in the day when cigarettes, it was everywhere. It was on TV, it was in magazines and stuff like that. And years, 40, 50, 60 years down the road, we're seeing all the cancer that it's caused. This, we don't know the short-term effect, but the long-term effects are probably gonna mirror that as well. But not to take away from bowling. Bowling, you know, we address those issues as well. They're handled great in the school. Very rarely do they make it to my desk because the school is on top of that stuff, okay? But these things right here constantly make it to my desk because we're charging everybody. I can give you the exact ARS statute because I'm writing these every day or every week. They get sent to court, they get referred to court. One of these, first time, you're probably paying $100 and some fine and probably ended up with some type of consequences. And it only goes up from there. You end up on probation for something like that. Guys, if you have any questions, please do so. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I had for tonight.
Go ahead.
That, you still were in the topic of bullying because some people get bullied into vaping.
Absolutely.
So we're good, huh, B?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about too is not recently, this has been a couple years past or several, there will seem to be a disconnect between the school and the resource officer. It seemed like the school only used the resource officer as a whip. They only wanted his face to come in after they talked to somebody to say, you're finally in trouble. We had to call the officer. So the officer was looked at as a negative, not what this council really wanted in that position. We wanted them to see a friend. But, and again, principals passed, superintendents passed. That's where it happened. And they were, again, using the resource officer for a bully, a whip, like I said. And he wasn't achieving, you know, we didn't know where the cameras weren't working. There was fights like, and the middle school was worse. There would be fights like one person would be bullying one girl, and they said, we can't do nothing until she hits her back and stuff. So when she finally hit her back, they take them both to the police to try to be equitable. And so that ruined that one little girl. She thought, because the next day she went to school, everybody was telling her, oh, you're big and brave, you finally hit her back and stuff. So her personality changed it where, you know, I got to show that I am brave now and forever, and she ended up worse. There was rocks in the front door to prop the door open so that the teachers could get in and out, or anybody could get in and out of the door. The exact thing we saw on TV were some of these shootings and things like that. So there wasn't real good cooperation between the school and the resource officer. Now there is. We got a superintendent that works with us well here. We got principals that work a lot better. So that's why I was hoping that your job, that you could do it now. And you didn't have to be there, because you even said you counseled. We just had a few students come up here and said there was no counseling. And so, you know, you say there is, so I'm kind of think there is. But you saw that their mental thing was, there about any given day, there's 17 homeless kids in there that are not sure where their home's going to be for 2 weeks for a time being. There's lots of issues that you wear a hat for. I'm just hoping that we support you to where you can do your job. And that's my main concern, sir.
Mayor, Councilman Lopez, first of all, I'd just like to say that commend Officer Schreiner because he does a great job in our schools. I know you guys probably, and I hope you do, get lots of compliments because I know I do weekly with about, they'll say, oh, Mike, he's great. Every time we call him and we need him to come in, he's always there for us. as far as our relationship with the school, I don't think I'd be remiss when I say that it's at an all-time high right now. We have a great relationship with Superintendent A.J. Taylor.
Yep.
At this point, we're working with them on a daily basis. They're consulting with us and we're consulting with them. So we have a great relationship. I will say that he is super busy over there, and it's not all criminal, it's with the kids, because he does have, that one-on-one with the kids, and he does a great job. I mean, I really can't say enough about the job he does over at our schools, and for one guy to handle 6 campuses and 3,500 people, that's a pretty tremendous ask for him. So, we are doing our best, and I think he does above and beyond what he's asked to do a lot of times. And, just this past week, I guarantee he was there every night because they had homecoming activities and things like that. And so, it's a great relationship, so.
Well, I know we entered in a new era just recently with you and the captain, and we're out trying to make better friends with the community and stuff. You're just getting going, and there's already things going on, and I see that, and I'm hopeful. So that's why I'm hoping the rest of us support you.
And just to let you know that it doesn't end at the school. This past weekend, you saw our command post.
Yeah, you guys
Our
all
big,
up
our
there.
big pop-up canopy, and, we had tons of kids coming over, and one of the things we were giving them is police officer or friends, and then we also gave them that was a coloring book, and then additional coloring books that talked about bullying. We put in their internet safety, so, and we had, like I said, we had tons of kids come up and gave them all a bag with, they love the stickers and the pencils and that, so it's working out pretty well.
It's not easy, officer. You dealing with kids, parents, teachers, craziness, so I commend you, sir.
Appreciate it.
And I'm glad I got to meet you finally.
Absolutely. And then I'm always at the school, so,
Okay.
and after activities as well. This will be busy for us.
Okay, sir. All right. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to clear my name. I mean, I'm sorry, Arnold had a personal interaction and he got upset, but I think the school program was great. I mean, I wasn't the whipping, the principals didn't whip me around. I was doing my job. I mean, Mike's doing what I was doing. I mean, it was, and I didn't have many complaints. I mean, you can ask, all the other chiefs. I mean, we did great. I'm sorry one incident, ruined tarnished the program, but, the program is great, and I did it for 7 years. And do it for 7 years, and if you're the whipping stick for 7 years, I mean, you're doing something bad. So apparently, I was doing something good, so I just wanted to clear my name on that.
Thank you, Councilman.
I appreciate it. You guys, thank you for the presentation, and keep getting those vapes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's devastating here with the age bracket they're coming off of. That's really devastating. Thanks again. Announcement of current events.
Mayor, I have something. This weekend will be the Hispanic Heritage, and the council or city of Safford will have a table for 8 individuals, so if anybody's interested in going,
And so it's Saturday at what time?
6 to 9.
6 to 9?
Yes.
Okay.
So let Mr. Casella know so I can get the names and put them down, or.
And B, I'm sure you've already posted that, or you will for us, right, just in case?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I think the Salsa Fest went off well.
I was absent.
Yeah,
due
you
to-
are, you sicky?
Yeah, just a little under the weather.
Matt, Salsa Fest went off well, and Arnold, the Cananeas bunch came down, and you hosted them you and Matthew hosted them very well.
They treated us muy lindo allá, Mayor.
Say it again?
Muy lindo nos trataron.
Ah, listen to you, hot dog. I don't even know what he said, Mikey.
They treated
What-
us really lovely.
Well, good. I appreciate that. I appreciate you stepping up and doing that, Matthew, you as well. Anybody else have anything? Request for future agenda items. I guess you already got mine.
Next
yesterday.
meeting, we'll be ready, all utilities.
All right. Anybody else have anything under future agenda items? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close our regular meeting and reconvene it. Well, I need a
Mayor, I make a motion, we go into executive session?
We have a motion. What do we need to go in there for?
Well, if we could say that, we wouldn't be here having an executive session.
What is it for?
Well, let's go back there and I'll tell you.
Legal advice, okay. All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Sounded like I opposed.
Yeah.
tail? What is sana sana? Colita de rama. But what's the? It means put a lemon.
Hey, anybody that beats the Cowboys is a good team. All right, entertain a motion for adjourn.
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Oh, I make the motion, we get back into regular meeting.
You got that.
Now I make the motion, we adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.